The Honorable President Trump, Chinese and American business representatives, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It is my real pleasure to have President Trump with us today for this China-U.S. business exchange. Over the years, the business communities of our two countries have been committed to the friendship between our two nations. You are a strong driving force for economic cooperation and overall relations between our two countries. Your commitments and your contribution are highly appreciated. This year marks the 45th anniversary of the Shanghai Communique. Over the past 45 years, China-U.S. economic relations and trade ties have achieved historic development, delivering great benefits to our two peoples. Last year, the General Motors, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, the three U.S. automakers, manufactured and sold over 5 million vehicles in China. The number was bigger than their combined sales in other parts of the world. The Chinese investment in the United States is also rising rapidly and has created over 140,000 jobs directly for the local communities in the United States. During President Trump's visit this time, as we have witnessed right now, our companies will sign commercial contracts and two-way investment agreements worth over $250 billion. These are great examples of the vast potential and win-win nature of China-U.S. economic cooperation. The Honorable President Trump, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, you must be interested in the Chinese economy and China-U.S. economic relations. Let me share with you my following thoughts in this regard. First, the Chinese economy enjoys bright prospects. The Chinese economy is now shifting from the stage of high-speed growth to one of high-quality growth. The first 3 quarters of this year have seen our GDP growing by 6.9%. But more important thing is, the structure of the Chinese economy is being upgraded. Going forward, the Chinese economy has the foundation, the right conditions, and the momentum for continued growth. China has a big population, and the dividends of population will continue to be released. We have a prospering market, and we have rich sources of economic growth. During this year, the IMF has revised up its forecast about the Chinese economy for a number of times. This reflects its optimism in the Chinese economy. Second, China is unswervingly committed to reform and opening up. Reform and opening up are critical to China's development. We will further deepen the supply-side structural reform and introduce strong and concrete measures of reform in market, fiscal and taxation, financial investment and financing areas, and related to the state-owned enterprises. We will take big strides in comprehensively deepening reform. Opening up is China's basic state policy. China will not close its door of opening up and will open it even wider. We will act on the blueprint laid out by the 19th Party Congress of the CPC, break new grounds in opening up on all fronts. Foreign companies in China, including the American companies, will find the business environment here more open, more transparent, and more orderly. Third, China-US business cooperation has vast potential. As the biggest developing and developed country, China and the United States have much more areas for economic cooperation rather than competition. It is estimated that in the coming 5 years, China will import $8 trillion of goods. Chinese citizens will take 700 million overseas travels. These mean vast potential for economic cooperation between our two countries. China is willing to expand its imports of LNG, crude oil, and petroleum products and other energy products from the United States. We will also explore the potential of U.S. exports of beef, cotton, and other agricultural products to China. We will also deepen cooperation on service trade, including in the areas of tourism, movie, and education, while we also hope the U.S. will further ease its export control on civilian technologies and products to China. We will continue to encourage Chinese companies to invest in the United States and also welcome active participation of American companies and financial institutions in the Belt and Road projects. With our economic relations expanding rapidly, it is natural that we may have differences from time to time. The important thing is we act in the spirit of mutual benefit and mutual understanding and seek proper settlement through dialogue and consultation. A Chinese philosopher once observed that trading can generate friendship and mutual benefit. Looking ahead, I have full confidence that with joint efforts of you, the business representatives present here today, and the business communities of our two countries, China-US economic relations will achieve greater success on the basis of equality and mutual benefit, and our two peoples will gain increasing benefits along this process. Thank you.
谢谢习主席。现在，我宣布中美企业家对话会到此结束。
And there you heard Chinese President Xi Jinping talk about the One Belt, One Road initiative and the various partnerships with the United States. President Xi and President Donald Trump are at the business meet, which is now ended. We earlier heard Donald Trump talk about the strategic partnerships with China, and now we heard President Xi Jinping also engage in talks there. Remember, this meeting has been very important, always on the sidelines of the threats from, in fact, North Korea, especially with their nuclear ballistic missile programs. But here, both the leaders talk about their strategic partnerships and, in fact, the build-up to their business partnerships going forward. And the investments, in fact, according to President Xi Jinping, is increasing in the United States. It's creating jobs as well. Donald Trump, in fact, gave credit to China for, reaping benefits from the U.S. economy. He also said he looked forward to, in fact, lift the restrictions. Now, this is important. Chinese firms have always found it difficult in the United States because of certain restrictions by the country. Joining me on the program is our senior correspondent, Sumit Chaturvedi. Sumit, you heard both the leaders talk there. This is a business meet. What are your key takeaways from this?
Well, Jessica, I will put it this way, that business is a low-key war that goes on between the countries all the time, especially between the US and China. This is a low-key warfare that keeps on happening all the time. Today was a day when both the leaders, they came out and actually tried to show their best, we can say that, sides when it comes to business. So Donald Trump started by saying that China is taking a lot of business from US, but they can't be blamed because they are doing it for their own purposes. In a way, he showed that it is US weaknesses why businesses are going to China. On the other hand, China tried to show that how China is benefiting US by creating jobs in the country. So in a way, both the biggest economies, one of the biggest economies in the world, remember they are the first and second largest economies in the world, they are on are sitting across the table. So a lot is happening, and big business deals are brewing between both countries. Remember, Apple is if I give you an example, Apple is a US companies, but phones are manufactured in China. That's how the complex nature of today's businesses are. But looking at that, both China and US are sitting across the table. Some deals could be signed as far as businesses are concerned, but China is I'll still call it an emerging economy in the sense that there are many products that US still rules and China is still striving to be there. Let's take an example of aircraft. Boeing is a US company. Boeing is manufactured in Seattle, and China in the last 1 year has come out with its own aircraft that is trying hard to sell to the world. Remember, it will only kill the US, the Boeing customers only. So there, both China and US are big trading partners. On the other hand, competitors also across the world. So that's what is the overall, the background of the meet today. And meet had actually a big significant, will be seen as big development going forward too.
Absolutely significant in many ways, and also highlighting the relationship between the two world leaders. Of course, President Donald Trump at loggerheads with the Chinese president, not only on the issue of North Korea's ballistic missiles, but also looking at what Donald Trump said. He said he will lift the restrictions on Chinese firms ease of doing business, perhaps in the United States. Would you think that it is really going to change a lot on the way China does business in other countries, perhaps a lot of business that it does in the United States?
Well, absolutely, Jessica. Here also Trump is trying to reach out to China for more than one reason. Another important reason here could be North Korea, which is so far was helped by China in a clandestine way. We all know that the North Korea's biggest trade partner was China, and somehow Trump has to woo China towards its own market so that China is going to support US as far as the North Korea tensions are concerned. So here, US is wooing China once again because after all, FDI is important and China is one of the world's biggest sources of FDI in the whole world. And US, on the other hand, they are also seeking to create more and more jobs, which will need FDI. Like India also, India has its own Make in India plan. Ease of doing business is being followed very strictly. US also is in this race. Trump also came to power promising millions of jobs and bringing down the joblessness rate to record low levels. That has happened to some extent also. But going forward too, US will need FDI, and China is the biggest source of FDI in the whole world.
Absolutely, Samit. Two important countries and discussing of their bilateral meet and their business. In fact, deals would be important to look at. The world will be watching that anyway. But thank you for joining us on the program and giving us those details. Staying with the President Xi and Donald Trump meeting on the day 2 of his China trip, President Donald Trump held bilateral talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Of course, that we saw the focus on North Korea's nuclear missile program. And also, Trump was given a ceremonial reception by Chinese President just this morning in Beijing. And the U.S. President is expected to push reluctant Chinese President Xi Jinping to tighten the noose on North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile threats. Remember, this is an important issue for the United States, and the visit has been dominated by this. His China visit comes right after a speech, in fact, to South Korea's National Assembly, remember, in which he urged, nations, including China, to isolate North Korea. Trump said that he and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping believed that there was a solution for the North Korea crisis.
Our meeting this morning in front of your representatives and my representatives was excellent, discussing North Korea, and I do believe there's a solution to that, as you do. Discussing trade with the United States, knowing that the United States really has to change its policies because they've gotten so far behind on trade with China and, frankly, with many other countries. And I have great respect for you for that because you're representing China. but it's too bad that past administrations allowed it to get so far out of kilter. But we'll make it fair, and it'll be tremendous for both of us.
Another big item on the agenda is trade between the two countries. Of course, U.S. and Chinese firms have already signed $9 billion in deals as part of Trump's visit. He's also expected to focus on ways to reduce what Trump had earlier called an embarrassing trade deficit with China.
Mr. President, thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. There can be no more important subject than China-U.S. relation. We have between us, and we have to include some other countries which would quickly come in. We have a capacity to solve world problems for many, many years to come. Our meeting last night was absolutely terrific.
Joining me on the program, and of course to discuss more on Trump's visit in South Asia, especially in China today, is Atul Aneja. He's a Hindu correspondent based out of Beijing in China. Good morning, Mr. Aneja. Your key takeaway from this visit? Clearly, his visit has been dominated by the North Korean threat.
No, I don't think so. I think North Korea has been stated and it has been put on record. But I think the real story is the forward momentum being imparted to the China-U.S. relationship. And this morning, before the speech of the two presidents, deals worth $250 billion have been signed. Now, this is something unprecedented and includes 50 Bell helicopters, Boeing. I mean, it's Qualcomm, which means electronics, energy sector. So clearly, this is massive. And along with that was also, the dialogue on security. North Korea, of course, when it comes to security, was an area which Mr. Trump highlighted, Mr. Xi did not. And but also references to that they are on the same plane when it comes to ensuring security in the region. I thought that was a very, very important statement coming out from the U.S. president. So instead of a confrontational kind of a tone, there was a recognition of differences, but when it came to trade issues, but the spirit in which they were being addressed were cooperative. And I thought that the context, the tone is important here.
Absolutely, Mr. Aneja. The tone was important. We heard both the leaders rather in agreement on most issues here. They also talked about, for example, just the meeting or the business, in fact, discussion just got over where the two leaders said that these are doing business with each other, the countries. In fact, Donald Trump highlighted that he would lift restrictions on doing business in the country for China. Do you think this is, in fact, moving towards a good, perhaps, I think, strengthening friendship from where it was?
Absolutely. I mean, it's taking it to a different... I mean, what was, for me, the biggest takeaway was that it is not looked at as a rivalry or as a new Cold War as if it's beginning. And, when we in India talk about this relationship between U.S., India, Japan, and Australia as part of the Indo-Pacific, with references, especially in the Japanese media, that this is an arrangement for China's containment, I don't think Trump is buying that line at all. It is trying to build bridges with all. And I think that the new mentality, if it comes through, now we are talking of what the impression one is getting from these two speeches and the deals which have been signed. But I think we can see early signs that in terms of geopolitics, this is moving in a very different non-confrontational direction. And the U.S. would be one player which can get everybody on board. And I think one important element also was Xi Jinping's reference to the Belt and the Road and wanting U.S. companies to invest in the Belt and Road project. Now, that's interesting. We'll see during the day if anything on that trajectory is also taking place. So clearly, the framework in which this dialogue is taking place and the body language, the welcome which has come, it shows that it's not in a spirit of rivalry and containment, rather in a problem-solving way, while recognizes that there are major issues. Trade is going to be a massive issue and it's going to call for a very detailed dialogue. But, we saw in the case, let's say, of the Indo-U.S. nuclear deal, there were a lot of resistance, but when President Bush wanted it to happen, it happened. And you'll see the same probably with Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, that the bureaucracy and the lobbies within which will resist it. But if the president wants it, and he has enough traction in the Senate and the Congress, if he develops that, then it will go through. But we'll see. But very interesting opening of a new framework seems to have happened this morning in Beijing.
Absolutely, from the two biggest economies in the world. Thank you, Atul Aneja, for joining us from Beijing this morning.